Okay, Year 12, Lesson 2, in our research on how powerful is a modern Prime Minister. This lesson is focused around the article by Richard Heffernan, Prime Ministerial Predominance. And your job will be to read the article and then complete the form that's been created for you. Okay, let's start on talking about what Heffernan's article is about. Well, he's taking the article on in 2008, so he's talking about Blair and also then Brown, and looking at the nature of prime ministerial power in regards to that. He starts off in his introduction by talking about where does prime ministerial power come from? What are the royal prerogative powers such as hire and fire, the capacity to control the cabinet gender, etc. But secondly, he talks about the qualifications you need to become a prime minister, the fact you have to be an MP, and secondly, you've got to be leader of the majority party. These are important when you consider later about how much you can argue the prime minister is actually a presidential figure. Okay. Next thing, he refers to the challenges a prime minister may face, and there's a multitude of these, okay, which any prime minister can face at particular times. What I'm interested in is, as you read this, you want to consider them in regards to Johnson. For example, issues to do with his authority with his cabinet, or perhaps his relationship with different powerful interests, or perhaps the fact that he's firefighting over the time. Can you come up with examples that kind of fit with Johnson's prime ministership in regards to this, to show that Heffernan's thoughts are still relevant today? Next, what Heffernan does is he rejects the premise that the Prime Minister can actually be compared to a President. He does this in three ways, because a Prime Minister, unlike the President, is not elected individually. They are, of course, the leader of their majority party. Secondly, the Prime Minister doesn't have a personal mandate. The reason they're there is because their party has got forward with a manifesto, so it reflects the party, not the person. And thirdly, the Prime Minister controls a compliant majority in the House of Commons, unlike the President, who's completely separate to Parliament. This even suggests that the Prime Minister can be seen as more powerful than the President because they have that control over the House of Commons and they can push through their agenda. Secondly, you can find that Prime Ministers can even change the constitution of the country through passing legislation. You wouldn't be able to find that the President could change the composition of the Senate, for example, but Tony Blair was able to change the composition of the House of Lords. The second part of this page, which is relevant, is how Heffernan refers to Foley in suggesting the Prime Minister can be viewed as beyond their government, the way their personal style can push them as being seen as beyond the government, the way in which international affairs can push them that way too. And thirdly, you talk about how their news media can be used as taking them beyond the government too. Foley kind of tries to imply that the Prime Minister, the leader of the political party, has become more relevant in recent times because the political party has become less relevant. It's almost as if people vote for the person in charge rather than the party label, is the suggestion that Foley puts forward. Okay, then what Heffernan does is he puts forward the view that actually the power of a predominant Prime Minister will be both contingent and contextual. So what does he mean by this? Well, it's contingent, I think, on personal style and authority that they have over their cabinet. Context talks about the circumstances that they face, the parliamentary majority they may have, the economic state of the country at that time. It might be that they have other issues or crises they've got to be able to deal with. So power can therefore be seen as quite a fluid thing, depending on those various aspects. And finally, and probably most importantly, Heffernan then looks at what the institutional resources and personal resources that a Prime Minister can utilise. What's the difference between these two things? Well, institutional resources, you're really talking about the things that come by being Prime Minister, your capacity to control number 10 and how the government actually operates. Personal resources are the things that you can use to enhance your authority. It might be your approval ratings. It might be the way in which you can communicate effectively to the nation, etc. So as a result of which, these things can also vary. And it all depends pretty much on the style of the Prime Minister. So your job is to read the Heffernan article and then complete the form that is provided for you on your OneNote page. This will show me how well you've got on in understanding the different concepts that have been brought forward. It also led us to move on to this next stage, which is to consider prime ministerial power in three different ways. The institutional powers that they enjoy in the core executive, the political powers that can enhance or diminish their power, and the personal powers, which again can enhance or diminish their power while in office. If we were to look at Blair, what we can see is that he certainly enjoyed his institutional powers. He utilised those as much as he could, strengthening number 10, using bilateral meetings and smaller cabinet committees, limiting collective discussion as best he could. So he used his institutional powers as a means of really promoting his own personal strength. His political power varied due to various factors. For example, things that enhanced his political power were his election victories, the weakness of the Conservative opposition at the time, and the strong economic position he had until 2007. On the downside of this, he faced an increasingly rebellious party. He had Brown as a very significant figure within his cabinet who he couldn't ignore, and he had the crisis situation of Iraq, which really drained at his personal authority. That takes us to his third thing, his personal power. In many ways, Blair was the perfect presidential prime minister, the way in which he could put himself forward as speaking for the nation. However, as Riddle suggests, his authority waxed and waned. At times it went up with particular events, at times it declined with others. And we've got to be aware of this, and it shows you how fluid, even with Blair, power was over time. That will allow us to consider now criteria for judging Johnson. How's he used his institutional power and number 10 to try and control the government? What's the nature of his political power, and how's that changed over time? From when he became leader before the election to after the election, has that changed because of that situation? And what about the nature of his personal power, his skills as a communicator, his style of leadership, his nature of public approval and his media image? Have they been suitable for the time we're in, or have actually they been a hindrance to him being more successful as a Prime Minister? These are the issues we want to be taking on next in our seminars. I hope that makes sense. Good luck.